Have you ever met someone who never seems stressed about money? Not because they're a millionaire, not because they won the lottery, not because they're showing off expensive cars or posting photos from five-star resorts. They're just calm. An unexpected bill arrives, and they handle it. The economy gets shaky, and they don't panic. They don't seem obsessed with becoming rich, yet somehow they always seem to be moving closer to it. Now compare that to someone who earns the same income, maybe even more. Yet every month feels like a race they can't win. They're constantly waiting for payday. Every purchase comes with a little guilt. Every financial setback feels like an emergency. So what separates these two people? Is it intelligence? Luck? A higher salary? I don't think so. I think the biggest difference is something you can't see. Because wealth doesn't begin in your wallet. It begins in your mind. Long before your investments grow. Long before your income increases. Long before anyone notices your success. Your habits quietly reshape the way you think. And once your thinking changes, your decisions begin to change. Then your life quietly follows. Today, I want to share 10 habits that don't just help people build money. They slowly rewire the brain to create what I like to call quiet wealth. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that buys peace instead of attention. And the beautiful part is, you don't have to be born rich to build it. Here's where I think most people get stuck. We treat money like it's a math problem. Earn more, spend less, invest the difference. Simple. Except, if it were really that simple, everyone with a high income would become wealthy. But that's not what we see. Professional athletes have gone bankrupt. Lottery winners have lost fortunes. Highly paid executives sometimes live paycheck to paycheck. At the same time, there are teachers, engineers, nurses, and ordinary office workers who quietly become financially secure over time. So what explains that? Psychologists have a fascinating idea. Your brain is always looking for shortcuts. Every decision costs energy, so whenever possible, your brain turns repeated behaviors into automatic habits. That's incredibly useful when you're brushing your teeth. It's much less useful when those automatic habits involve spending money. Think about the last thing you bought that you didn't really need. Did you sit down with a calculator? Probably not. You felt something first. Maybe stress, maybe boredom, maybe excitement. Then your brain quietly created a story that made the purchase feel reasonable. That's why changing your financial life is so difficult. Most people try to change their bank account without changing the invisible patterns that control it. It's a little like repainting a house while ignoring the cracks in the foundation. It looks different for a while, but eventually, the same problems return. The people who build quiet wealth don't simply earn differently. They think differently, and that changes everything. Habit 1. Learn to pause before spending. Let's start with a habit that sounds almost too small to matter. Learning to pause. Not forever. Just long enough to let your emotions catch up with your logic. Imagine this. You're lying in bed after a stressful day. You open your phone for just 5 minutes. An advertisement appears. Limited time offer, only 2 left. Sale ends tonight. 5 minutes later. You're entering your card details for something you weren't even thinking about this morning. Has that ever happened to you? It certainly has to me. What's interesting is that companies aren't just selling products anymore. They're selling emotional relief. Feeling overwhelmed? Buy this? Had a bad day? Treat yourself? Feeling like you're falling behind? Here's the newest version. Over time, something subtle happens. Your brain begins connecting spending with comfort. The purchase isn't really about the shoes, or the headphones, or the gadget. It's about escaping a feeling, but here's the part nobody talks about. That feeling usually comes back. The excitement fades. The package arrives. A few days pass. And suddenly you're scrolling again. People building quiet wealth aren't immune to this. They're human too. The difference is that they've created a tiny gap between emotion and action. Sometimes it's 24 hours. Sometimes it's a week. That pause changes everything. Because once emotion settles, logic finally gets a chance to speak. And here's a sentence that's worth remembering. Every dollar you don't spend impulsively gives your future self another option. Quiet wealth isn't built by making perfect decisions. It's built by creating enough space to make fewer emotional ones. Now, you might be thinking, so the secret is just spending less? Not exactly, because I've met people who barely spend anything. And they're still deeply anxious about money. That's because wealth isn't just about what leaves your wallet. It's about how you measure success in the first place. Habit 2. Measure wealth by freedom, not appearance. Imagine two neighbors. They leave for work every morning at the same time. One drives a brand new luxury SUV. The other drives a 10-year-old sedan that's clean, reliable, and completely forgettable. If you only looked through the window, you'd probably assume the first person was wealthier. But appearances rarely tell the whole story. The SUV comes with a payment so large that changing jobs feels impossible. Vacations create anxiety. Unexpected bills become emergencies. The older sedan? It's paid off. Its owner sleeps well at night. Has savings. Can say no to a toxic workplace because they aren't drowning in monthly obligations. So who's actually wealthier? That's the trap our brains fall into. We're wired to notice status. For thousands of years, fitting into the group meant survival. Today, that instinct quietly convinces us that looking successful is the same as being successful. But they're completely different things. The people building quiet wealth aren't trying to look rich, they're trying to become difficult to control. Because every payment you eliminate, every dollar you save, every unnecessary expense you avoid, buys something far more valuable than status. It buys choices. And choices are one of the purest forms of wealth. One of my favorite ideas is this. Luxury isn't owning expensive things. Luxury is having the freedom to make decisions without money constantly making them for you. Once you start measuring wealth that way, your priorities begin to change. But freedom has one enemy that almost nobody talks about. Our obsession with getting everything immediately. And that's exactly where the next habit comes in. Habit 3. Become comfortable. Waiting. Modern life trains us to expect everything now. Food arrives in minutes. Movies start instantly. Packages show up tomorrow. Need a loan? Sometimes you can get one before you've even finished your coffee. Without realizing it, we begin expecting life itself to work that way. We want careers that explode overnight, investments that double next month, savings that somehow appear without years of consistency. But wealth follows a completely different clock. Imagine planting an oak tree. For weeks, nothing seems to happen. Months go by. Still not much. If you judged your progress only by what you could see, you'd probably give up. What you can't see is what's happening underground. The roots are growing first. Money works the same way. For a long time, the results are invisible. You're saving, learning, investing, saying no when everyone else is saying yes. It feels like nothing is changing. Then one day, people look at your life and say, "You're lucky." They never see the years you spent growing roots. That's why patience is such an underrated financial skill. It's not passive, it's productive. Every month you stay consistent, you're teaching your brain something incredibly valuable. I don't need immediate proof that I'm making progress. And that mindset changes far more than your finances. It changes the way you approach almost every meaningful goal in life. If you've noticed something interesting by now, none of these habits are really about money. They're about the way your brain makes decisions. Because every financial choice begins somewhere long before your wallet opens. It begins with what has your attention. And in today's world, your attention might be the most expensive thing you own. Habit 4. Protect your attention. Like it's money. Let me ask you something. Have you ever opened your phone to reply to one message, then somehow ended up wanting a new watch, a better laptop, a bigger house, or a vacation you weren't even thinking about 10 minutes earlier? It's strange when you stop and notice it. Nothing in your actual life changed. Your income didn't change. Your needs didn't change. Only your attention changed. And suddenly, your desires changed too. That's not an accident. Today, your attention is one of the most valuable products in the world. Companies spend billions of dollars trying to earn it. Not because they enjoy entertaining you, but because they know something powerful. Once they influence what you pay attention to, they can influence what you believe you need. Think about it. How often have you looked at something online and thought, "I've been fine without this for years, so why do I suddenly feel like I need it today?" The answer usually isn't the product. It's repetition. The brain has a fascinating tendency. The more often it sees something, the more normal it begins to feel. And eventually, normal starts feeling necessary. That's why protecting your attention isn't about avoiding social media forever. It's about becoming aware of what repeatedly enters your mind. Because whatever repeatedly enters your mind eventually shapes your financial decisions. People building quiet wealth aren't trying to avoid the world. They're simply more intentional about what they allow to influence them. Instead of constantly consuming messages that whisper, "You're behind," they look for ideas that quietly remind them, "You're building something that takes time." That shift changes more than spending. It changes how you feel every single day. Here's a thought that's worth holding on to. Your wallet usually follows your attention. Guard one, and you'll naturally protect the other. But even if you protect your attention, there's another trap waiting. One that's so common most people don't even notice it's happening. It's the habit of confusing your value with your valuables. Habit 5. Separate your self-worth from your net worth. Imagine someone asks, "So, how's life going?" What's the first thing your brain wants to prove? For many people, it's success, not happiness, not peace. Success. We've quietly grown up believing that earning more somehow makes us more important, that a bigger paycheck means we're finally enough. But here's the problem. Enough keeps moving. You finally get the promotion. For a few weeks, it feels incredible. Then it becomes normal. You buy the nicer apartment. The excitement lasts a while. Then your attention shifts to someone living in an even bigger one. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. Our brains adapt surprisingly quickly to improvements. Yesterday's dream quietly becomes today's expectation. And that's why some of the highest earners in the world still feel financially anxious. They're chasing a finish line that's constantly moving. I think almost everyone falls into this at some point. I know I have. You start measuring your progress by comparison instead of direction. And comparison has a cruel habit. No matter how far you've come, it always introduces you to someone who's farther ahead. That's an exhausting game, because nobody wins. The people building quiet wealth eventually make an important discovery. Money can improve your quality of life, but it should never become proof of your value. Once your identity depends on your income, every financial setback feels personal. A bad investment doesn't just feel expensive, it feels like failure. A slower year at work doesn't just reduce earnings, it reduces confidence. That's far too much pressure to place on money. Instead, quiet wealth treats money as a tool, not a mirror. Your income is information, not your identity. And when that realization sinks in, something unexpected happens. You stop buying things to impress people who were never paying that much attention in the first place. Instead, you begin spending on things that genuinely make your life better. That's a much calmer way to live. One sentence I come back to often is this: the richest people aren't always the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They're often the ones whose confidence isn't for sale. Now here's the interesting part. Once you stop chasing appearances, you naturally start asking a better question. If I'm not spending my extra money trying to look successful, where should it actually go? That brings us to one of the highest return habits you'll ever build. Habit 6. Invest in skills before status. Let's imagine two friends. They graduate from university together. They get similar jobs. They earn almost identical salaries. For the first year, their lives look almost exactly the same. Then payday arrives. One friend celebrates by upgrading everything. A nicer apartment, designer clothes, the newest phone, a luxury car payment that quietly follows them every month. The other friend does something much less exciting. They buy books, take courses, improve their communication, learn about investing, develop skills their company values. At first, nothing seems different. In fact, the second person almost looks like they're falling behind, while everyone else is showing visible upgrades. They're quietly upgrading something nobody can see: themselves. Then 5 years pass. The first friend has better photos. The second friend has better opportunities. One built a lifestyle, the other built leverage. And leverage has a remarkable way of paying you back for years. Markets change, technology changes, companies change. But valuable skills have a way of following you wherever you go. That's why so many financially resilient people never stop learning. Not because they love studying, but because they understand that skills compound just like investments do. One conversation improves another. One promotion creates another opportunity. One new ability opens another door. Progress rarely happens in giant leaps. It usually happens because small improvements quietly stack on top of each other. Here's a simple question I like asking before spending money. Will this purchase make me look richer or become more valuable? Those are two completely different investments. One impresses people for a moment, the other changes your earning potential for years. And here's something worth remembering. The market can fall, A company can disappear. Technology can replace certain jobs. But if you've invested in your ability to learn, adapt, communicate, and solve problems, you've built something much harder to take away. That's the kind of wealth nobody can repossess. By this point, you might have noticed a pattern. Quiet wealth isn't created by one brilliant financial decision. It's created by hundreds of ordinary decisions that almost nobody notices. But the next 4 habits are where that philosophy becomes practical. Because this is where quiet thinking turns into quiet action. And that's where real change begins. Habit 7. Learn the quiet power of saying no. Imagine your closest friends are planning a weekend getaway. The hotel looks amazing. The photos are beautiful. Everyone seems excited. Then someone says, "Come on, you only live once." It's a simple sentence, but it carries a surprising amount of pressure. Nobody wants to feel left behind. Nobody wants to be the one who says, "I can't afford it." So people say yes, not because it's the right decision, but because it feels like the easier one. The interesting thing is, for thousands of years, belonging to the group meant survival. Our brains are still wired that way. That's why financial decisions are rarely just about money. They're about acceptance, identity, connection. But people building quiet wealth eventually realize something important. Every yes is also a no. When you say yes to every impulse, you're quietly saying no to future freedom, no to flexibility, no to opportunities you haven't even seen yet. Learning to say no isn't about becoming cheap. It's about becoming intentional. There's a big difference. You're not saying, "I'll never enjoy life." You're saying, "I'm choosing the timing of my enjoyment." That tiny shift changes everything, because delayed enjoyment isn't denied enjoyment. It's often better enjoyment. One of the most peaceful financial habits you can develop is becoming comfortable disappointing people's expectations, instead of constantly sacrificing your own future. Here's a sentence I hope stays with you. Every thoughtful no protects a future version of yourself you'll eventually be grateful for. Of course, even people with great intentions struggle, because motivation is unreliable. Some mornings you feel disciplined. Other days, you just want life to be easy. That's why the next habit matters so much. Habit 8. Build systems. So your future doesn't depend on motivation. Let's be honest. Motivation is wonderful for about 3 days. Maybe you've done this before. You watch an inspiring video. You promise yourself this time will be different. You'll save more, spend less, track every expense. Everything feels possible. Then work becomes stressful. Life gets busy. You miss 1 week, then another. Before long, you're back where you started. The problem isn't you. It's expecting motivation to carry responsibilities it was never designed to carry. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning asking, "Do I feel inspired today?" You simply do it, because it's become a system. Money works the same way. Automatic savings, automatic investing, automatic bill payments, a monthly budget review already scheduled on your calendar. None of these feel exciting, and that's exactly why they work. The people who quietly build wealth aren't making hundreds of perfect decisions every month. They're making a handful of smart decisions, then letting those decisions repeat automatically. They remove temptation before temptation arrives. Imagine 2 people. One promises they'll save whatever is left at the end of each month. The other automatically moves money into savings the morning they're paid. Who saves more? Usually the second person, not because they're more disciplined, because they removed the daily argument inside their own mind. That's what systems do. They reduce friction. And here's something worth remembering. Your future isn't built by your strongest days. It's built by what continues happening on your weakest ones. That's why systems beat motivation almost every time. But even with great systems, life still has a way of surprising us. Markets fall, jobs change, unexpected bills arrive. Which brings us to one of the most underrated habits of all. Learning to think beyond today. Habit 9. Think in decades, not months. Imagine planting an apple tree. Would you dig it up every weekend to check if the roots are growing? Of course not. You trust the process. Yet strangely, that's exactly how many people treat money. They check investments every day, worry every week, judge progress every month, then wonder why they constantly feel anxious. The problem isn't the numbers, it's the time frame. When you're focused only on this month, every setback feels permanent. The market drops, you panic. An unexpected expense appears. You feel like you failed. A promotion takes longer than expected. You question everything. But stretch your timeline. And something interesting happens. That difficult month becomes one page in a much bigger story. Think back to your own life. 5 years ago, how many problems felt enormous? How many of them still matter today? Probably fewer than you expected. Money works the same way. Quiet wealth isn't created by avoiding setbacks. It's created by surviving them without abandoning the plan. That's what emotional resilience looks like. The people who build lasting wealth don't avoid uncertainty. They simply refuse to let temporary emotions rewrite long-term decisions. One sentence completely changed how I think about progress. Consistency is rarely exciting, until one day it's impossible to ignore. People often call someone successful an overnight success. They rarely notice the decade that came before it. And after all of these habits, there's one final lesson. It might actually be the most difficult one, because it asks a question our culture almost never encourages us to ask. Habit 10. Know what enough looks like. Imagine climbing a mountain. You finally reach the top. You're exhausted, proud, satisfied. Then someone points to another mountain, even taller. Suddenly, the peak you worked so hard to reach doesn't feel impressive anymore. That's what happens to many people with money. There's always another salary, another car, another house, another promotion, another investment goal, another person who seems further ahead. The finish line quietly keeps moving. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your entire life chasing it. The strange thing is, contentment and ambition are often treated like opposites, as if appreciating what you have means giving up on your dreams. I don't think that's true. Contentment doesn't stop ambition, it protects it. Because when you're grateful for what you already have, you stop making desperate financial decisions. You become harder to manipulate. Advertisements lose some of their power. Comparison loses its grip. You can still dream bigger. You can still build more. But now, those goals come from curiosity, not insecurity. That's a completely different emotional foundation. One of my favorite questions is simply this. If nobody else could see my life, would I still want this? That question quietly filters out an incredible number of unnecessary purchases, because many of the things we chase were never really for us. They were performances, and performances are expensive. Peace rarely is.